which is being held in Minneapolis, St. Paul on Friday, July 29th, 1983.
Howard Colum is going to lead off today. What do we call this? A little devotion that we've asked him to give us.
I want our devotion today to be an experience in which all of us can share, because we're all sharing in the reunion. And so I'd like to ask you to think with me, not on anything that I want to say that's intended to be profound or a point of beginning or anything like that, but rather I'd like to call upon you to pray with me, and in that prayer experience to share in the things that we have in common as we gather for the Wahl family reunion. And so today, we're going to do something that I want to call a time of giving thanks. I want to call it a time when we express some of our concerns about who we are in the world and what the world is about. And then finally, I want to ask you to pray for yourself. I want you to pray for others in our family. Let's pray for the whole world. And so I'm going to just simply recite some things that come to my mind, really a call to prayer. And then when I say the words, Lord, in your mercy, would everyone say with me, hear our prayer. And let's make it our prayer of beginning this day. Let us pray. For this place of beauty and recreation, for the willingness of so many to take the time to be here, for the efforts that have been put in by so many in planning for this event and implementing all of its aspects, for the safe journeys of so many from near and from far, from distant places and even from overseas, we give you thanks. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayers. For the heritage we recall in the lives of Christian and Anna Gertrude Wahl, for their pilgrimage to this land, for their examples of evangelical piety and devotion, for the sacrifice and the times of celebration and joy that we see in their lives, and for all of these things which make up the ideals that have been taught to their children and are an inheritance to us, which is ours today, their grandchildren, those who have ethical decisions to make. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayers. Then, Lord, we ask that you will help us to remember in thanksgiving those who have passed away since the last Wahl reunion in 1981. We remember in deep devotion and thanksgiving, and affirm in our prayer here this day our belief in life eternal as we think of the lives of Leslie Kraft and John S. Wahl. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. For these days now, when we can share with others,
Thank you. We're going to talk about who are the Walls as soon as some people get settled, but you have a scorecard for keeping track, and I see everybody's got a scorecard except me, so whoever has them, please give me one. No, I don't think I had some either. Is somebody? Where are the extras? Who's got the extras? Because I really need it. And on your scorecard, the names of the original Walls are at the top. And then the names of all their 12 children are in the column there, as you've probably discovered. And then the names of each one of their children is going to put in. And the people who are attending the reunion and their spouses are underlined. And then the people that are attending that come under the next generations are put in. I naturally ran out of space, and this is not a complete genealogy. But it does tell the lineage of everybody that's here today. Well, Christian Wahl and Anna Gertrude Wahl were born in Germany, near Kassel, Germany, in Hesse. And we were able to visit the relatives that are presently living in Germany, and we've been there several times. And we have some slides, and Diane's is going to do a slideshow. Now, some of these slides, some of you have seen before, but I hope you found slides you didn't know she had. So she's going to show the slides, and then she's going to tell the relationship to our grandparents in the slide. We are ready to go down. We went. In 1961, the same three people went. In 1965 and 1972, Wesley and Inez went. So I have 4 different trips that I've just stuck all together. So we will be going from one to the other. Things change, and I hope you'll agree with me that it's sort of fun to see the way things have changed in Germany over those period of years. This was one of our very first views as we came off the Autobahn, and there is one of the main Autobahns from Hitler's days, went up to Kassel, and we got on an overlook and looked out over Kassel. Now, this is surprising, white in Germany, and that's a new house with new furniture. Things really improved over the time. And she's with her mother and her grandfather, who was a jolly type. Both her grandfathers. No, that's our rooms, and that was a big thing in 1958. And the other thing was that whole place Kassel had been leveled, and they went and took their little wagon to Kassel and brought back the rubble from the bombing and put that together. Those people that lived there and built that house out of it. And were they proud of that house? And they had a right to be. 1974. They tore the house out like that, built a brand new house, which cost them at that time 100,000 marks, which would be about something like, in our terms, $25,000 was a pretty expensive house when they built it. Balconies and all. We stayed in indoor bathrooms, very nice. But the courtyard and the farms and the rest are still there, just the same. Except the name. And when Grandma wrote a letter back to Germany in 1878, when Lizzie was 14 years old, she said, I was sick when the baby came. That was George. And Lizzie had to do all the work. And she had Willie and Otto and Tilly and Lydia and Emily. Those were the kids at the time. And also that Lizzie had started working out. So she was working for somebody else. And it makes me wonder who was doing the wall work when they let Lizzie work out. Because the next girl was 5 years old at the time. That was Tilly. But Lizzie did quite a bit of work, housework for other people, and took care of children probably. And she moved to, I believe it was Moscow, Iowa, wasn't it? But Lizzie went to work, and that's where she met John Hahn when she was 20 years old. So we're delighted today to have some of Esther Saiwasi's daughters here. So we'd like to introduce her. And we have Helen Carter. She's going to stand up and be introducing her husband and her brother, that's Wayne. And they came from the Iowa farmers, and we're happy to have them. Then we have Merle Newman and James Newman, who are also here. Also from, you're from Muscatine, is that right? And then they have a daughter, Marlene Etter. And so Marlene is here. Marlene has been teaching school, but she says she doesn't know what she's going to do now. So Marlene has done some very nice work with picture books. So when you go to the display up there, be sure and look at Marlene's picture of the house. They're nice. So that we're well represented today with Lizzie's family. And when the Wahls were in Germany, they had one baby who lived to be 3 months old and died. That was August Otto. And then when Grandma was coming, when they came over on the boat, Grandma was pregnant with Uncle Willie. And then he married Lois Chester, and Lois, we're very glad, got here from California today. Where is Lois? So, get a good picture of Lois.
I worked in Wahl store for 20 years.
You worked in Wahl. You were a buyer for Wahl store too, weren't you? And did anybody else here work in Wahl store besides Carl? I think Carl worked in it.
No, I worked.
Yeah, how old were you when you worked in the store?
Junior high years. I candled eggs and waited on tray, sold kerosene, and Saturday night customers, like along with
Lila Herwig.
And with Anna Dorothy Wahl.
When I was going to Ames, I'd go on Peyton for vacations, and I remember I candled eggs at the store too.
We also welcome Lois's sister, Mabel Price, and her husband, Gerald. You want to stand up and let people see who you are? Because you just got here.
I say we had our store, it was across the street from the Wahl store.
What kind of store did you have?
General merchandise, Obie Price and Sons store.
Good competition.
The competition. Oh, I didn't know we should. When they had the competition, I thought we would all bow and reverence about the Wahl store.
The American picture.
They wanted to know whether they could come today, and I figure anybody that's willing to come to this reunion ought to be welcome. So here. And of course, they know quite a few people who are here. So they should feel welcome.
Thank you.
We ride on his motorcycle. I'm about scared to death most of the time.
She was probably putting
He had a bad accident where he was pretty badly shaken up.
Eileen is going to perform for us tomorrow night. And her daughter is due in this afternoon at the airport. That's Marlene. Marlene is an airline attendant, and she's coming in between some flights, and she's going to be here. So we'll be glad to see her. And the other, Uncle Will's son was Howard, who still lives in Des Moines, and I believe he's retired now. He was a meat cutter for a supermarket. And then we had Uncle Otto, who had the mechanical engineers and mechanics in the Wahl family. We have Arthur here today, who's a mechanical engineer, graduate from Iowa State and from University of Pittsburgh. And he's well known for his research on springs, and he even brought us his book. When was your book first written, Arthur?
Well, the first edition came out about 1943.
43, and it was
43, yeah, about 40 years ago.
And the second edition in 63.
Was 63, and just last year, the spring manufacturers came out with a reprinting of the 63 edition, a reprinting for their members.
And see, that's a classic in the field, the spring. So if you want to know anything about springs, of course, you have to go to Arthur Wall's book about.
She was in the hospital for about 10 days, and she's not completely recovered yet. She's still very weak. So they probably have some excuse. He's a little bit shy, and they probably have some excuse now for not coming, but they said they would not come. Told me that. Well, my father always said he was a much better mechanic than I was.
You had to go get a PhD so you could do your work, and he does it with that.
I started out as working on tractors and on the farm, you know, and Ray would help me, you know, but he eventually became better than I was. Got scratched.
And is Peggy with him?
Yes, yes.
He did bring his wife, who he called
Yes,
Peggy. We're overloaded with Peggy's and John's at this reunion. So if you say that name, you have to be sure who you're talking about. So this is her first time with us, and Roger and Luella are supposed to come later on to his rest of his family. But Robert is here right now, so he's going to stand up. And where's your family, Robert?
They all went swimming next to Roanoke, and he lives in a very nice mobile home down there, but he has another one that is his office, and he has a little pattern shop that he makes wood patterns in, and he, up until about a year and a half ago, he was also gardening down there, and if anybody needed a tree planted or rototine done, why, Albert was the one you wanted to see.
See, that's another Wahl trait, is this gardening. You saw the gardens in the pictures. Grandma has a marvelous garden. And I bet you we can go down the line here about all the rest of them in their garden. About Will? And of course, I should have mentioned Uncle Will was more famous for almost for his landscape work than he was for his store. And we have beautiful pictures. He had Wahl Brothers in front, Tate in front of the store.
Well, flowers.
And flowers.
Just like a floral clock.
I missed that.
She's coming.
No, she's coming in.
Yeah. She's due on the plane tonight. Is that so we can look forward to seeing some new faces there. Well, there's one thing unusual about Tilly. She was born, not unusual, in 1873, the second daughter, and she was, here comes Albert John.
I'll be back in just a few minutes. I leave downstairs.
Okay. Well, now, has that ever struck you as being strange? Because it was different. And let me tell you, it wasn't easy for her not to marry a German. Because when she was a small person, a young girl, there was the farmer used to come around the neighborhood helping with the harvesting, and he rather took a liking to this little red-headed, blue-eyed girl, and he literally waited until she grew up so he could ask her to marry him, because he was 12 years older. When she was finally 19, through with high school, had gone to Highland Park College, as many of her sister scouts do, then, and taught school for a year or so. Then Charlie McCain decided that he could ask her to marry him. But the thing about that was that Gertrude Wahl did not consider he was a suitable husband for her daughter, and so she wouldn't allow Tilly to get married. Now, Tilly said she was too young, and it was a little young for that family to get married at 19. Anyway, Tilly did not give up, because we have her correspondence with Charlie, in which she tells about how it was when they were in school, and really they had a pretty good social life in Peyton. They all went to church in the morning at whatever church they belonged to, and then at night they went to the young people's at the Methodist church, and that's where Charlie McCain went. And they obviously had a better youth program, and they wrote to each other when they went on trips. I think if you went 30 miles away to visit your cousin, all your friends wrote you letters while you were gone, like kids do now, and so forth. And one of the letters she says, "I think Mother will come around." And finally, when she was 25, her mother decided that it wasn't any use in her holding out, so she had said, okay. Now, actually, it wasn't just that Charlie wasn't a German. It was also that she had an idea of what kind of a guy he was. And it wasn't that he wasn't an exemplary Christian, because he certainly was. He was a mover. And she was right on the button on that, because no sooner did she marry Charlie than he took her to northwestern Iowa, where the father-in-law lived, and they lived there long enough to have a child, namely Hugh Raleigh. The next year they pulled out of Iowa with my father, Charlie McCain's father, and went to the Panhandle of Texas. Now, the Panhandle of Texas was a climate that only a 6-year-old boy could love. And if you read my brother Hugh Raleigh's description of it, you'd think it must be a lot of fun. I know my mother hated it. She had a sod house. There were rattlesnakes. Sometimes they got into the house. There were northers in the winter. I mean, that's a cold climate in the winter. No snow, but it's not warm. By the way, my Charlie left because he hated blizzards in Iowa. So, but they sold the land there in 1909. By that time, they had 5 of those little kitties. One thing very sad happened while they were in the Panhandle, and that was their third child, Freddie, was drowned. And I know that was a very hard thing that happened to the Wahl relationship, because not but a few months before there, Tilly had come home with her babies, her children, and she had this little 20-month-old tot with her that sort of captivated the hearts of everybody. And then she wrote back and told about the sad, he drowned in a post hole. To drown in the Panhandle of Texas, where it doesn't rain very much, is hard to do. But that happened. But at that point, Hugh Raleigh, we call him Hugh now, but most of you grew up calling him Raleigh. His sister, Anna Gertrude, we call her Gertrude. And then James Percival, whom we call Percy, and many of you call Percy, but when he grew up, don't do it, kids. He hated that name. He said that was why he was so big and strong. I know a lot of you remember Percy. And also, besides Freddie, Edith Evelyn was born there. And then they moved away from that, sold the land, made a little money on it, went down to the Gulf Coast near Port Lavaca. That's not really too far from Corpus. Terrible climate, hot, muggy, and the neighbors were didn't care much for Yankee immigrants, which they were. So they didn't like that. They moved away to Rosenberg, which was, and by the way, Jerome Gore was born there. And then they moved to Rosenberg, Texas, which is close to Houston. It's really an exurb of Houston now. And Charles Vincent, you grew up calling him Vincent, we call him Charlie, and Charlie is here today. So if you would like to stand up, Charlie, and be introduced.
And please applaud.
Because we're delighted that he took, unfortunately his wife had family problems and couldn't, not his family, hers. And Charlie and Irene and I, Miss, were all born in Rosenberg. We stayed there for a while. My dad had a farm about 30 miles away in a place called Thompson, and he had to ride the train to Thompson during the week because there weren't any schools. And let me tell you, in the McCains, you had to have schools for your kids. And there were no schools, so the rest of us lived in town. He went to Thompson. If you went back to Thompson now, if you could find it, you'd have to see a whole bunch of oil wells, because the whole farm my dad had is oil wells. But he got flooded out by the river in 1915 and lost his livestock and stuff, so that discouraged him about the farming at that place. So he bought a farm at Minneapolis, which was near Houston. And he moved us all there. And Irene and I spent most of our lives in Houston, so in Minneapolis, so that's what we remember. Okay. Now,
We didn't have a very exciting one.
no, it was pretty dull. Panhandle was much more exciting. I mean, the rattlesnakes and all. Now, we are very proud today that we have got a lot of the McCains here. We had a reunion yesterday. I wish you all could have done the same thing. Gertrude's son, Robert, is here. Robert, are you going to let us...
Are you going to have a picture of yourself on that?
You're going to acknowledge yourself. He is our reading paper. And I haven't told you what everybody does with their lives, but I think too. His wife, Jean, is here. And 2 of his daughters. He has 7 daughters and 1 son. That's for an only child. That's quite a change. His daughter, Martha, and 2 of his grandchildren, namely Sarah, who is speaking to us. She's the youngest grandchild. Well, it's hard to beat that one. She's the youngest person here today.
She's the youngest. She's buried.
She's the youngest Wahl. I mean, nobody's had babies in the last 3 months, right? Nobody's had a baby in the last 3 months. Sarah is it. Well, some of us might have had grandchildren or great-grandchildren. These are Gertrude's great-grandchildren I'm telling you about. Is Rachel there?
She was. She's gone swimming.
Well,
With her aunt.
I can't blame any of the kids for going swimming, that's right. Well, let's see.
I want to tell you that I talked to my McCain cousin, and she was up here. She said it was a wonderful reunion.
Yes,
So
we
my
had a-
McCain cousins are my husband's McCain cousins, so McCain cousins.
Yes. My father's brother married a jester who was, well, it's his aunt. So we have a relationship. We're non-relatives. And let's see, Edith's children are here, some of them. Jean? All of Edith's descendants, except Judy, are here. So Jean Evelyn, her number 1 daughter, with her husband.
Frank must have gone swimming too.
All right, Frank went swimming. We're not sure they're all here. Danny?
Danny's lifeguarding.
So Danny's like, with the tall one, with the crew cut.
Dan is the best babysitter, child tender around that we have known.
Well, they've been all just totally good ones here, but he's excellent. He's, besides being a nice young man, but Amy is
here. She just got out of the pool.
Amy. And then the number 2 daughter, Ann Backer, and her husband, Fred. And are your children in the pool? In the pool. Now, there are 2 winsome little Backer girls around, and you can spot them. Hugh Raleigh, I have to tell you the careers, was an electrical engineer. And by the way, one thing about moving to Houston, Texas was that there happened to be a university called Rice there where you could go without tuition, which was very useful to poor farm people. And if you were bright, like some people like Hugh Raleigh were, and Anna Gertrude, you got scholarships. And if you were an athlete like Hugh Raleigh was, you also got to wait on tables in the dorm. So the kids were able, those older ones were able to work their way through school or get scholarships, and they helped the rest of us get through. 6 of the 8 of us went to Rice. Irene and I were the oddballs. We did not. We don't even know if we could have applied to Rice. You had to be pretty good students to do it. But
What do you mean pretty?
very excellent. Top, yes, he told me. Doug Robert, Mommy is a Rice graduate. He's qualified. His mother was a very good student. An attorney, and then he went to New Zealand to become a dairy farmer. And his son has come from New Zealand to visit to be part of our reunion today. So it's John Charles McCain. So please stand. let's see. You've already met Charlie. And Charlie was a mechanical engineer for Humboldt, Exxon, whatever you wish to call the company. Irene and Inez were both nursing instructors. Irene longer than Inez. And all of us are now retired. Did I finish?
Who's the man at the projector?
My husband, Wesley Saw. I sort of introduced him before, but I guess that's right. He's at the last. He gets at the last. Inez is number 8 in our family roster. And Aunt Lydia married Reverend John Kraft, who was a widower with 4 children, including a newborn baby. And so she had 4 children of her own, so that meant she actually raised 7 since the baby died at an early age. The 4th child, John Kraft. And she was a pastor's wife. John M. Kraft was assigned evangelical pastor who was assigned all over Iowa and went from place to place, including Peyton. And he was just lucky that he was serving Peyton when his first wife died. And he was a very good friend of Grandma. And they liked to talk theology. So it was rather natural that one of Grandma's daughters would be his next wife. And Lydia was the one who got it. Lydia was she was a very artistic person. And I think she had a very fine singing voice, which I think good singing voices were rather characteristic of the Wahls. But she was certainly blessed with those talents. And her stepchildren, I talked to one of their stepchildren once and was just praising what a wonderful mother she was, not only to her own children, but to her stepchildren. So I'm sure she was a very fine wife, minister's wife, and mother to her children. And we have quite a few of them here today. We're very, as Howard Palm told us that Leslie died last year. And of course we miss him a whole lot because Leslie made a real contribution to our reunions, and he played the violin for us. And we would like very much to have Leslie's wife and daughters here, but they're having Pearl is not very well, and the daughters are down in Stewartville helping her, so I'm afraid they won't get to come to see us tomorrow. We were hoping they might be able to drive up tomorrow. They're the closest of all the relatives. Physically, that is. But John is here. John A. Kraft from California is here. He's had a career in coaching, and now he's happily retired, I believe. So you want to stand up, John, in Alberta? His wife. And then we have Lorene. Lorene has had a career in music, and we're going to be privileged to hear her play tomorrow. And so and her husband Harry Scornia is here, and we're
Who's Lorraine?
Lorraine is here. She's going to stand up.
Might I add?
You want to say something?
Leon wanted us to tell you how sorry he is not to be here. They're down now in Lake of the Ozarks for their own little craft reunion, but he hadn't been able to get their children together before. And so Mike is in films and so forth, and he may now be in Africa or someplace else shooting another film. But it's been hard to find the time. And Leon is happily retired, doing better than he's done in years, health-wise, and wanted to be remembered.
Thank you very much. Leon he taught music, didn't he? And had a music store.
He still plays, he still has a band, and still plays in 2 or 3 other bands.
They said he probably could have some more music. You'll have to get Leon here sometime. We can enjoy it. But we also have we have Lorraine's daughter, Peggy Mason, who's here. I've forgotten her. And her husband, Tom, and his husband. And Peggy's also a musician, so we talked about music and the crafts. You had to talk about, because Leslie was, he directed the band. So when Peggy's going to play for us the violin tomorrow. Now the next person on the line was Emily, Aunt Emily. Aunt Emily married Simon Meyer, who was also an evangelical pastor. And they lived a good many different places. They didn't seem to stick to Iowa, because they lived in Missouri sometime, and they were out in California sometime. And that's one family I don't really have a history on. I'd asked other people to write family histories for me, and that's why I know these things, because people have written them. Except I can't get anybody, but so far I haven't been successful in getting the Myers to write. Well, the number is dwindling quite a bit. George is dead, and Gertrude isn't in, Gertrude's in very good poor health. She's been in poor health for quite some time. Carl is dead. I don't know whether, and the next one was Naomi, who likes to be called Joy, but to us, she's still Naomi. And I can see Carl Meyer Carl Lying wants to talk, not Carl Meyer. He wants to talk about
Naomi, please.
Yeah.
Naomi has lived in San Francisco for about the last 30 years, and on various occasions we've been together. I think on one occasion when you were our guest, why Naomi was our guest too. And she just within the last few months has had occasion to be in our home, and she asked us to bring a book for the display in lieu of the presence of anybody from the Meyer family. And she asks that if any of you have any suggestions or ideas or corrections, that they be included in the book, which we'll be sending back to her. But she sends the greetings from the Meyers, just even as others have been expressed here. And she had wished that she could come to this occasion, but she has been unable. As you say, Gertrude lives in the Quad Cities, Davenport, Rock Island, Illinois. I don't know, I believe with one of her daughters.
She only has one daughter.
Right, one daughter, but I believe I'm right in saying that she lives in the Quad Cities now. Her husband died from Lincoln, Nebraska. And let's see, Marion, the baby, he lives in...
the baby, he's our age.
Yeah. He lives in Omaha. He was very seriously ill, but he has very well much recovered and is working again, I believe. And then Paul, about my age, I believe, he lives in Northern California.
Naomi's going to Egypt. That's where she comes.
Oh, that's right.
Naomi's, is she there now in Egypt?
No, she is, but she is planning a trip to Egypt this fall.
And maybe next year she'll be here.
Well, not next year.
I don't think she...
So she didn't have any sleep all night, and so she's going to be back.
Stand up here. We were talking about you before you came in, Eileen.
Behind my back.
No, you're back.
We wouldn't have said if you had been here.
Oh, okay, that's right. But some things, if she'd been here, we might have said some other things too. Anyway, we're happy to have you here. We went down the line, and Will came at the top of the line. So this is Eileen Pike, and you said that Marlin is coming in from
Salt Lake, but she had a Honolulu flight. She's a stewardess, flight attendant for Western Airlines, and she had this Honolulu trip and worked all night last night, you know, and she said, she hoped she'd get on that first flight because she was going to be a basket case. So she really will.
George George was Uncle George to everybody. And he made a career out of being an uncle. And I think all of us that were his nieces and nephews have very warm, fond memories of Uncle George. He was in the store all the time, but somehow or other had a chance to do some visiting. He took time he made trips to California, he went to see his brothers. He never got to China, but he got to visit everybody else. And he had a way of being special to each one of us individually. When he visited us in Texas, he'd take each of us downtown with him. So I didn't have to go with Inez. I had him all to myself. He took me to the movie and took me to the drugstore, and we had a club sandwich. I cost 15 cents. But he was the bachelor. And he had girlfriends, but it took him a long time before he finally married. He was 53 when he married Clara. But he had a rather long and happy marriage with Clara because he outlived everybody else. He was 85 when he died. And he was living in Boone, Iowa, and we used to visit our brother Jim down in Ames, and every time we visited him, he said, well, we have to go see Uncle George. Uncle George is getting old, and we have to be, you never know how long he's going to last. This went on for 40 years. But it was fun, except he got increasingly deaf, so it was harder and harder to visit with him. And Aunt Clara outlived him for about 12 years, remarried.
Mention his funeral.
Oh, at Uncle George's funeral in 1965, we have a lot of cousins who visited. And a lot of you remember that. Were you Eileen was there, and Jimmy was there, and you and I were there, and Wes was there. Wayne happened to be in the state, and he was there.
You were Trudy?
And Trudy, and Helen, and John Spears was there too, with their kids, weren't they?
Yes.
With the kids were there? Now who have I missed? Anna Dorothy? Was there?
Well, of course, Lowell.
Lowell and Anita were there. So you see, somebody has
There were 18 of us or some.
You have to be some kind of an uncle to get that kind of turnout.
He had one of the wildest funeral processions I've ever been taken part in.
We drove from Boone to Radcliffe down highways to 70 miles. Pretty lively lady, I understand. And she married Uncle Dave Lang. And David Lang was another evangelical minister, so there were three, and Grandma had three sons-in-laws who were preachers, which pleased her quite a bit. And Uncle Dave was Aunt Ella's sister, Aunt Ella was Uncle Will's wife, and did I get that right? I didn't say anything real bad. And also, Clara Hahn married the Langs, so there are lots of Langs. The Langs are going to get together after this thing. So, because Eileen is one, see, Lois qualifies as a Lang, and so we have quite a few of them here. So they moved around all over Iowa, too. So if you want to know all the places that they have evangelical churches, you just find out where the Langs live. And they had some fine children, and their oldest one is Ellen. Ellen is here. Where is Ellen? Here. Ellen Farley and her husband Paul is here. They celebrated their golden anniversary a year ago. Is that right? That's right. I got the years right. Retired in Arkansas from Paul was a pastor in Illinois.
That's right.
I called John Spears an Iowa farmer today, and I'm sure I'm going to be more careful.
He was a South Dakota school teacher for a few years, and Bristol wasn't that far from Wahl Bay, so we used to go over to Uncle Arlo and Aunt Carrie's on some weekends, and Ray and Mildred were there, and Ray helped Paul build a trailer, a four-wheel trailer, that when we came from South Dakota to Naperville, moved us and our worldly possessions behind a Model A Ford coupe. So we know he was a good mechanic, or at least he could help put something together.
Awful lot already, but anyway, stand up, Carl and Marie. You have to get a good look at Marie.
You're speaking about the lanes moving around. We were at 4 different places where the crafts were, and on one occasion we moved to Laverne, and I looked around the parish, and I observed the most beautiful girl available, and that was Marie.
And they moved to Laverne at the right time, didn't they? For you to...
I was the only girl in the congregation.
I was going to say, why did you qualify that the way you did?
And 3 of those places where the Crafts lived and the Langs lived, the Langs followed the Crafts.
Yeah.
So they had the people at Peyton, at Sheffield, and at Norris Springs had a long succession of Wahl women as ministers' wives.
I know. Yes.
Not Iowa.
You know, but you were from Peyton. So you qualify as a Peyton.
Yes, I was.
You lived there.
Well, I was born in Peyton since I arrived at moving time.
The closest friend.
Lorraine was born in Peyton. Usually Peyton produced the very first.
And then we moved there when I was 12. So I graduated from high school there, along with these other famous people who were Peyton High School.
That's we have some famous people.
I think I said this before, but when we moved to Peyton in 1923 in April, I was in the 4th grade, so was Eileen, and Lorene had just been in the 4th grade. So I got Lorene's desk, and our teacher was Lois.
Yeah. And you see what Carl grew up to be a distinguished professor in education at California, at the University of the Pacific. That if you go there, he'll show you his bench and insist that you sit on it. He has a bench in honor of Carl, is on the campus at the University of the Pacific.
It's known as the seat of learning.
What's happened to your brother? How come Wayne isn't here?
I don't know what happened to him. I never keep track of him.
I'm talking about Wayne. Wayne Lang is supposed to be here last night. And
he wasn't planning to get here till today. They were leaving Buffalo Wednesday afternoon. Their daughter Karen
and Betty. Of course, they had a younger brother, Vernon, who was a very popular person in the family, a very fine young fellow, but sadly was killed in an accident at age 20. He was planning to study for the ministry. People thought he had a very good future ahead of him. So, let's see, we got down to Ellen. Next is Harry. Harry was the bachelor in the family. He never got married. He was the one that went out west to make his fortune, which he never made. And he lived in Idaho and California and different places. And he was a practical joker, like a good deal of many of the family was. Walls had a reputation of being, especially Wahl men, of being teasers. And he was one of them. He finally ended up in Stockton, California, and Carl and Marie and their family befriended him in his later years, and they gave him a sort of a family that he had never had during his life. And they saw to it that he was properly buried. So he's buried in Lodi, California, which is the place he landed when he went west in 1908 as a young man. And he's one of them that lived to be a pretty old man, too.
He was the last one of his generation.
He was the last surviving Wahl. Now there's the in-laws. There are 2 in-laws that outlived him, but he was the last. Then there was Aunt Edith, who was the youngest girl. Edith, and I think she worked around the house quite a bit and took care of her grandma until she did marry Levi Tallman, who she had met through some common connections. The Tallman family and the people there had come from the same part of Germany as the Wahls did, and they got together, and I expect Levi was looking for a nice young woman to marry, and Edith was it, so they were married and lived in Radcliffe, and then they lived in Iowa Falls and Cedar Falls. And Uncle Levi was, he worked in a grocery store and a hardware store, is that right? Had a career in business. And so they lived in Cedar Falls a long time, and Anita lived in Cedar Falls a long time, and that's where she lives now. But in the meantime, I guess she's lived a good many places. She married Frank, Art Frankhauser, who was a minister who got moved around too. So we're very happy to have them here. They're retired in Cedar Falls, Iowa. So would you stand up, please?
Yeah.
Anita was with us 2 years ago, but it's Art's first time. And then we have...
managed to get him here this time. I told him when we were coming, I said, 2 years ago, you were going north, and I was going to Illinois. This year we got to come together, and I'm real happy that we could.
And then we have Lowell, who, Lowell, I think he started out being a school teacher, but he didn't care too much for that. So he's been in business in Cedar Falls for a long time. Are you retired yet?
Mostly.
Mostly. You still have, you have a printing business.
We had a printing business, right?
Mm-hmm. And he's got Peggy with him. They have kids, of course. How about standing up? We're happy. She's a Peggy, but she's a Marguerite instead of a Margaret. But if you want to know about, I'm a Margaret too. So we have several Margarets. We have another one coming up. So let's finish up with Carl Benjamin. Of course, Carl was the favorite son of Anna Gertrude and Wahl, because he was her one son that got to be that studied for the ministry. Then he wanted to be a missionary, and he went to China in 1916 when he was 30 years old. And soon after he went to China, he found they didn't want to send him to China single, because they knew in those days if they sent a couple out, then they had a couple. If they sent one out, then they married off the missionary they already had. So it depleted their ranks. But he did find Elizabeth Schempp, who was a German woman who was a missionary, and I think they must have fallen for each other right fast after they met each other. Because they married as soon as they could get government clearance to get married. And she was about 35 at the time, wasn't she? And they proceeded to have 4 children. She was some woman, I tell you, and Elizabeth. But Uncle Carl was a missionary in China for many years. And I know it was very special to the family, because when we said our family prayers, we prayed for Raleigh, Gertrude, Percy, Edith, Romus, and Irene, and his grandma and Uncle Carl. And all the others were cousins. So all of you were cousins. Is that the right way to pray? No, Mama, Papa, probably was Percy, Edith. So, well, Uncle Carl was a very special person. It was very sad when he died at such an early age. Of course, he was 48, but for Wahl, that was the youngest one. youngest age anybody died. And we're very, and of course their oldest son was John, who was a distinguished atomic physicist.
Yes.
And then they had Margaret, who has been a nurse, and her husband, who is a professor of biology or something like that. I don't know what they call professors these days. You're still working, aren't you, Norm?
Yeah.
Okay, stand up. They're from Pennsylvania. And they have 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter, and the daughter's here. So here's Janet and John. You call it Black?
I'm so used to hearing it the wrong way.
Blackjack. Well, I don't know how it is. So you want to get acquainted with them. And then next we have number 2 daughter, who is Trudy. Of course, she was really Anna Gertrude Wahl. You understand that, don't you? That she was the namesake for her grandmother. Grandmother had a lot of people named for her. She had Anna Dorothy, and she had an Anna Gertrude, and she had a Gertrude Meyer, and she had Anna Gertrude Wahl. So her name is Trudy Palm, and she's here, along with Howard Palm. Trudy and Howard were the ones that started these reunions 4 years ago, and of course they get a lot of credit for anything that goes on at Wahl reunions. Because I guess if it hadn't been for them, we wouldn't be meeting today. And let's see, we're down to we come to the last. The last one is Helen. Helen Spears and John Spears. Helen was born in Germany on a furlough, on the Wall's last furlough, and I don't know what else she does. It always boggles my mind to hear what Helen does, because she's a very energetic person. And John is an Illinois farmer. They don't have any of their children here today. They have 3 lovely daughters and 2 adopted sons, whom I'd be glad to talk about to you.
Could I say one thing about Carl? There are...
Uncle Frank?
Yes,
Carl Wahl.
Carl, yeah, my father-in-law. You know, there's these letters that Trudy and Howard have been working up, and in due time I'm sure they'll be in sufficient form so that everyone will have a chance to read them. They are fantastic, and the letters that he writes to his mother are very, very touching. He had a very close relationship with her. And of course, you come back to Uncle George again. You know, everybody's Uncle George who did all these things for them. Well, when you read Carl's letters, then you'll really understand what Uncle George did. Because I don't think that Carl could have existed in China without Uncle George. Because he, even packing up the organ in Peyton and sending it out to China from, well, all kinds of tasks he did. But of course, Carl existed on supplies from home, and George always got the supplies out.
So he was his backup.
He was his backup all the way.
And sounding board, too.
And his sounding board. These letters are fantastic. I hope in the future that they will be available, that everyone would have a chance to read them, because once you start reading them, they're very hard to lay down. Carl had a terrific gift of penmanship.
But if it weren't for Uncle George, he was the one who saved the letters.
And if it weren't for Aunt Trudy and Uncle Howard that got together and started translating.
Uncle George idolized his brother. There was no doubt about it. So the Uncle Carl's letters are plans, and you got some money too to have them printed. So they probably will be available. And from what everybody says, they're written in a very good style. Very fascinating letters about China. So I think this would be something to look forward to, reading the letters of Carl Wahl. And maybe somebody will want to print them and they'll get to be a bestseller. I don't know. question about. So we have that part of our heritage to be appreciative of.
You may not have been. And I believe it was in 1967 or so, 68, when we were visiting Carl and Marie in California. We went over to San Francisco to spend a week or so. And on Sunday, we went to the famous or infamous, depending on your point of view, Glide Memorial Church in downtown San Francisco. And there were...
Her name was, and I recognized the fact that she was my cousin, and so I said to her, "You're my cousin." I had never seen her before. You just might find them anywhere. I was thinking we don't know some of our other second cousins very well. They're probably all over the place too. We may have met them and not known them. Well, that concludes the introductions. Is there anybody that didn't get introduced? Fine. I believe from beginning from going out this driveway, you might have to make 6 turns to get here. That's not many. You have to get from my house to this place. Kentucky Fried Chicken. Kentucky Fried Chicken. There isn't any Kentucky Fried around, but there's a lot of things. If you keep on going on B2, over past Fairview, you find what's called Fairdale Store.
Missed the first few minutes of the history in Germany. I've asked Irene to repeat just a word or two about the beginnings back in the old country.
Christian and Anna Gertrude Wahl were born in Germany, and they were married in Niedermühlrich, Germany in 1863, and they came to the United States. They sailed on May the 15th, 1867, and landed in New York, and then they came over to Muscatine, Iowa, which is where the first children were born.
I'll choose the way I pronounce my name.
So
You pronounce it McKean?
Yes. Oh no. We have
McKean. Yes.
South of the border will pronounce it correct. So there's another one. Positions you think they're going to get on in Australia?
a couple for residents.
Snelling for our regularly scheduled 4 o'clock. Through Port Snelling and back. We have a full narrated cruise plan for you. So in front of that, and marked in front of us, is our Viking Explorer, which is a mini cruise ship, as we call it, has overnight account. You might notice a ravine that bends back towards the right. Well, in the 1830s, there was a man who